In the 1901 census, 111 people lived on the island of Stroma, in the Pentland Firth off Caithness, and by 1962, the last two families rode off, and nobody has farmed it since. Hold on that island for a moment. There is a church there, a school, a harbor, built with government money in the 1950s, concrete pier and all, put up to keep the fishing alive. The gulls have it now. The pews sit in the church. The desks sit in the school. And the sea moves the way it always did, and no one is left to hear it. Here is the record, given plainly. The fishing failed. The young people went to the mainland for work and did not come back. And the Pentland Firth, that narrow stretch of water between Stroma and the Caithness shore, runs too hard to keep a community alive out there. It is one of the fastest tidal races in Britain. When the boat stopped, the island had no way to feed itself, and one family after another crossed to the mainland until only two were left. Then those two crossed as well. That is the record. This is what people say. Along the Caithness shore, they still tell you the houses on Stroma are kept ready, that the lamps are lit, on certain nights, in windows behind which no one has slept in 60 years. As if the people who left mean to come back, and the island is only waiting. Ask yourself why anyone would keep a lamp burning in a house no one has lived in for 60 years. And that is the question this whole list turns on. How does a worked island, an island with names in the parish register, and a harbor built to last, go silent? And why does the mainland never quite let it stay silent? That is one island. Keep the count in your head. There are 8, and the last one is the strangest. Number 2, Mingulay, off Barra, at the bottom of the Outer Hebrides. The record is short, and it is honest. By 1912, the island was empty. The last families had petitioned to leave, and they went across to Vatersay, where there was better land and a shorter reach of sea. Life on Mingulay meant landing your boat on rock with the Atlantic behind you and hauling everything up the cliff. When the chance came to leave, they took it, and they signed for it. That is the record. The story is gentler, and you have probably heard it without knowing where it came from. Mingulay is the island in the Mingulay boat song, the one about pulling for home against the tide. The song was written after the island was already empty. So the place people sing about, warm and full of men rowing back to their families, is a place that by then had no one in it at all. The mainland kept the island alive in a tune, long after it had let the island itself go quiet. Number 3, Honda, off Sutherland, a green cliff of an island under the Northwest Hills. The record here is harder. Honda had its own small parliament, a council of the families who lived there, meeting each morning to divide the work. Then came the potato famine of 1848. The crop rotted in the ground. The families on Honda could no longer feed themselves, and they left, and most of them sailed for Nova Scotia, a whole ocean between them and the cliff they were born on. That is the record. What Sutherland says, and it is a story, is that the island was never truly given up, that those who crossed the Atlantic left something of themselves on the grass, and that a place emptied by hunger keeps a kind of grief in it that the weather cannot wear off. So far the pattern is clean. Hunger, distance, a sea that runs too hard. An island empties because it has to. But number 4 breaks the pattern. Island Nanron, off Tongue, on the north coast, a herring community that was not starved out and was not cleared. In 1938, they simply chose to walk away from a living island. And the reason is where this list starts getting strange. Here is the record. Island Nanron sits just off Tongue, on the north coast of Sutherland, a low green back of land in a hard sea. The people there lived on herring. They cured it, salted it, sold it, and for a long time that trade kept the crofts warm and the boats busy. Then the herring moved on, and the market softened, and the young ones started rowing over to the mainland for wages and staying there. By 1938, the last families gathered what they could carry and left. Nobody drove them off. No landlord posted a notice. They simply decided the island had stopped being worth the effort. That is the record. What the mainland says is quieter and stranger. Along the tongue shore, the account goes that a living island can turn on you without a single dramatic thing happening. That the sea between you and the shop, the doctor, the school, just grows a little wider each winter, until one day the crossing feels like more than a family can ask of itself. The story is not about hunger or eviction. It is about the moment a fed working place quietly decides it is done. Hold on to that, because it comes back. Number 5. The Monarch Isles, off North Uist, out in the Atlantic on the western edge of the Hebrides. Here is where the record beats the ghost story. Watch which one is stranger. Start with what people say. The folklore of the monarchs tells of a great storm in the 17th century. A single night of weather, enormous, that swept away a causeway of sand and shingle said to have joined the islands to North Uist. Before the storm, the account goes, you could walk across at low water. After it, the sea took the path and never gave it back, and the little community out on the monarchs was cut off from Uist for good. A drowned crossing. It is a fine story, and the shore has told it for generations. Now, the record. The monarchs were not emptied by any 17th century storm. People farmed and fished there for centuries after that, right into living memory. They were kept going by two things: kelp, the seaweed they burned and sold for the chemicals in the ash, and a lighthouse, built to warn ships off that low sandy ground. The islands were abandoned twice. The first time, when the kelp trade collapsed and the numbers thinned. And then again, later, when the lighthouse light was automated and the keepers no longer needed to live out there. That is when the last of it went quiet. And here is the odd part, and it is not the drowned crossing tale. The odd part is that the sandbanks out there really do shift. The channel between the monarchs and North Uist is shallow and made of sand, and the tides move that sand enough to close the gap and open it again over time. So, the folklore and the survey maps almost agree. The legend says a crossing existed and the sea took it. The charts say the sea genuinely does close and open that channel, on its own slow schedule. The story got the drama wrong and the geography right. Before the next one, stop for a second. What you just heard about the Monarch Isles makes far more sense next to the estate plan and the survey dates. The places, the records, the sources, I put all of it into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Take 5 seconds, grab it, and come back. Now, number 6. Number 6 is Scarp, off Harris. A small island, a small population, and one very strange afternoon in its history. In 1934, someone stood on that shore and fired a rocket, not for a signal. The idea was to carry the mail across the water to the mainland by rocket. A proper experiment, watched and recorded. And it failed. That is one island, and I will give you the whole of it in a moment. The failure and the last families leaving. But the next one after that is a harder thing to sit with. 40 miles out past Lewis, alone in the North Atlantic, there is an island where a whole community is recorded as having died in a single stretch of the 1680s. Not left, not cleared, died. The chapel still stands over the graves. Here is the record on Scarp. It sits off the west coast of Harris, close enough to see the mainland of Lewis and Harris across the Sound, and far enough that a bad sea could cut it off for days. In 1934, a German rocket engineer came out to try something. The plan was simple on paper. Fire a rocket over the water carrying the post, and you would never again have a mother stranded on the wrong side while her child was born on the other. So they fired it. The rocket exploded. The mail scattered, burnt across the rocks, and the idea was quietly dropped. The people held on for another generation. The school closed. The young went to the mainland for work and did not come back. By 1971, the last islanders packed up and left Scarp to the wind. That is the record. What people on Harris say is gentler than a ghost story. They say the empty houses on Scarp still face the water, as if they are watching for the boat that used to come, and on a clear evening, you can almost believe someone is home. Number 7 takes us properly out to sea. North Rona. 40 miles past Lewis, a green scrap of rock with nothing beyond it but the Atlantic. And this is where the record turns cold. A whole community lived on North Rona for centuries, a handful of families farming a place most people would call impossible. Then, in the 1680s, they died, all of them. One account blames a plague of rats that came ashore off a wreck and ate the grain, and a supply boat that never made it out through a hard season. Hunger did the rest. When a boat finally reached the island, the people were gone, and the chapel of St. Ronan still stood over the graves as it stands today. That is the record, and it is thin, because the men who wrote it were writing about a place they could barely reach. What people say fills the gaps. They say North Rona was never quite empty after that a light was seen from passing boats where no light should be, and that the men who later came to shear sheep out there did not like to stay the night by the chapel. St. Ronan's grave slabs are worn smooth now. Nobody farms it. Nobody has for a very long time. Which brings us to the last one. This is the one the whole list was pointing at. Number 8, St. Kilda. The archipelago 50 miles west of the Hebrides, further out than anywhere else people made a life in these waters. And the record here is exact, down to the day. On the 29th of August, 1930, the last 36 islanders on Hirta asked to be taken off. A ship came, and they went, ending an occupation that had lasted at least 2,000 years. 2,000 years of people, on a rock in the open Atlantic, gone in a single morning. Before they left, they did a quiet thing that nobody asked them to do. In each cottage on the curved stone street, they left a Bible lying open on the table, and they banked the fires, laid them ready as if the family meant to be back by evening. Then they closed the doors and walked down to the boat. That is the record, and it is enough on its own. What people say is that St. Kilda did not go silent. On still nights, they say, the abandoned street of stone cottages carries the sound of the old work songs, the ones the women sang while they worked the wool, drifting along the empty houses with nobody left to sing them. So step back and look at the 8 of them together. Stroma, Mingulay, Honda, Ilia Nan Ron, the Monarch Isles, Scarp, North Rona, St. Kilda. Not one of them was emptied by a curse. Every single one went silent for the same plain reasons. Distance, hunger, a boat that failed to come, a single winter too hard to survive. The names are still there in the parish registers and the census pages, real people who worked real ground. They left because staying would have killed them. And then the silence settled in behind them, and the silence is what grew the stories. The mainland looks out at a dark island and cannot quite believe nobody is home. So, tell me in the comments which of these 8 you would least want to spend a night near. I already know my answer. Next, we come back off the water and onto the mainland itself, to the cleared townships of the Highlands, where whole villages were emptied by hand, and the stones are still standing in the heather.